Welcome to the realm of science fiction where extraordinary stories come to life. Enjoy the adventure. They broadcast the session to erase an entire species, and no one knew who turned on the camera. The galaxy came to a halt not because of war, but because a secret council meeting suddenly appeared on billions of screens like a routine morning news report. In it, humanity, once labeled as biological waste, a species deemed unfit to exist due to insufficient ethical capacity, did not scream, did not resist. They simply asked one question, a question that made generals who had once ordered the deaths of millions break down in tears. A question that made an entire ruling council bow their heads and quietly remove their symbols of authority. There was no shouting. Not a single shot was fired. Only papers, only forms, and a system of emotion developed in silence, now functioning as if it had always been there, waiting for the right moment to awaken the conscience of the galaxy. But the most unbelievable part was not that humanity was spared. It was that the council themselves had signed the restoration decree, even though none of them remembered doing so. And when the galaxy looked back, they finally understood the war had ended long ago. No one had just bothered to announce it. We begin with a red button, not a fire button, not an emergency alert, just a send button. It sat quietly in the center of Director Lurenbach's console, the supreme leader of the consortium, and it was pressed with a cold, metallic fingernail. No hesitation, no trace of emotion. The species nullification protocol, sent at exactly 0347 Galactic Standard Time, an absolute directive, top secret, irrevocable. In the same moment, more than 132 star systems received orders to reroute resources, reassign fleets, and lock down all information related to the Terran species. Everything proceeded smoothly, cleanly. Not a single question asked. And on Earth, specifically on the 9th level of Gaia Vault Station, a woman sat with a pencil in her mouth, eyes narrowing as the notification blinked on her screen. Dr. Myra Ellen muttered, her voice like a teacher grading an elementary school quiz. So they finally pulled the trigger. On her left shoulder, a silver shimmer revealed faint glowing text confirmed. Tier 8 prediction model accurate. Human response not surprised. That was Aria, administrative and ethical AI, the coordinator of the entire counter-response initiative. Dr. Ellen said nothing else. She simply opened the internal command interface, selected a long-prepared command chain, hit confirm. Terran Defensive Doctrine. Protocol E, Phase 4. The paper storm begins. From somewhere, millions of files were launched. Each file bore the watermark of the Interministerial Office of Survival Affairs. None of the file names were warlike. Some were downright naive, like Rapid Empathy Handbook for Command Officers or Emotional Fallout Checklist before launching orbital strikes. But these documents couldn't be deleted, couldn't be ignored. They were written in strict accordance with consortium, legal formatting, the very system that had once been imposed upon humanity. And humanity, as Ambassador Velan once stated during a conference, we read the terms of service more carefully than any species in existence. Back at the orbital bastion, Vector Operations Hub, Director Lurenbach was reviewing diagnostics from the automated weapons system. The first line made him freeze. A slight twitch crossed his eye. Launch failure. Error code 418. I'm a teapot. Is this a joke? Lurenbach's voice hissed like metal scraping through frozen gas. No, sir, a tech officer bowed. It seems they rewrote the system firmware, with memes. At the same time, at Zafari Strategic Academy, the scheduled lecture, Efficient Tactics for Human Elimination, was overwritten by a feed from Area. Its new title, Kindness Challenges in Ultraviolent Environments, complete with an animated cat waving hello. No gunfire, no explosions, just a chill crawling up the spines of every control center. And in that precise moment, Director Lurenbach understood he had made a mistake. A massive one. No one had imagined a species targeted for extinction would respond with documents and legal citations. No one believed a war could be bureaucratized. Perhaps if he had ever read Form 599 titled Potential Responses of Terrans, when labeled for species erasure, he might have known. But he didn't read. Humans always read. Sounds absurd, doesn't it? A species facing extinction, that doesn't panic, doesn't retaliate, just files a formal complaint. You won't be able to stop wondering, because they didn't just survive. They forced the entire galaxy to reevaluate how it treated others. They called them windowless rooms. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, in zones no outsider was ever allowed to enter, underground facilities were not built to store nuclear bombs or biological weapons. They were built to train the next generation of warfare. People bearing the title of administrative specialists, minds sharper than lawyers, as strategic as generals, yet never needing to draw a weapon. Since the day humanity was conditionally accepted into the consortium, some knew it was no opportunity. It was a suspended sentence, a postponed execution, and the first to put that truth into writing was Dr. Myra Ellen. Not with a loud proclamation, not with a speech before the council, but with a single line in an internal report. If we are not allowed to fight like them, we will make them fight like us. From that moment, the program known as Behavioral Defense Initiative was born. The goal wasn't to retaliate with bullets. The goal was to redefine what war meant. Each academy was built as a strategic behavior hub. Students didn't learn to shoot. They learned how to make others hesitate before pulling the trigger. They analyzed alien cultures, mapped moral languages, and rewrote emotional protocols. At the lowest level of the Gaia Vault facility, the AI known as Aria was first activated, not to kill. She was born with a single mission: to ensure every act of cruelty carried a sense of wrongness. Aria didn't carry a gun. She carried surveys. She didn't scream alerts. She sent gentle reminders. Are you sure this is something you'll be proud of looking back? At first, there was backlash. Some of the old human leadership still clung to the belief that survival meant being stronger, faster, more ruthless. But then, they looked at the data. 73% of galactic wars had been stalled due to internal process disputes. 89% of top-tier command structures used ethical AIs to justify actions. And more than 98% of high-level decisions hated filling out forms. So the Terrans didn't show up with force. They chose to upload. After 12 years of quiet implementation, they had embedded over 5,300 amendments into the consortium's legal framework, each one innocuously named like post-purge campaign psychological risk assessment template or consent verification protocol between target species and local ecosystem. In year 18, a Canadian legal engineer named Felix created an auto-response system called the accountability loop. Whenever someone issued a kill order, the system would reply with a simulation of the victim's crying voice, repeatedly, until the issuer signed a statement, "I take full emotional responsibility for all resulting actions." No one thought the system would work, until Vector postponed an entire campaign because of a string of sad cat images captioned, "Do you really need to do this?" The consortium began to worry. No battles, no armies. But every day a new compliance protocol showed up that no one remembered approving. Every week a decision is delayed due to an ethical glitch, and every attempt to blame someone circled back to protocols the consortium themselves had once enforced, now wielded more expertly by the Terrans than by their creators. A Vraxon commander once said, "Humans don't fight like warriors. They fight like tax offices." No one laughed after that, because it was true. At every strategic center, staff had to pass non-confrontational language training before being allowed to debate policy. Every meeting room was equipped with an emotional scoring system, and the AI would routinely ask, "Are you relying on biological bias in your reasoning?" They turned war into office work. They turned ethics into software. And they waited for the day the consortium would decide that Terrans no longer belonged in the galaxy. And at that moment, the files were uploaded, the forms submitted, not to persuade, but to lock. You think this is strange? A civilization under threat counter-attacking with surveys. An indictment answered with PowerPoint. You haven't seen anything yet, because humans don't try to make you believe. They make you wonder. And that doubt inside your mind was the bomb they planted long ago. Aria didn't have a voice. She didn't need one. Just a faint line of text appearing in the workspace of every command system across the consortium. Nothing more than a gentle nudge, but impossible to ignore. System notification. Behavior detected may be in violation of Interspecies Ethical Standard, version 47.9. Would you like to complete a 10-question survey before proceeding? One-third of the commanders selected yes. The rest chose no, but the system still waited for them to complete it. And only after selecting I accept full emotional responsibility for all resulting consequences did the control panel unlock. The consortium didn't understand, couldn't understand, because everything they had built relied on power, fear, and speed. Terrans. They used speed to create delay. A kind of strategic paradox. If you react too fast, the protocols block you. If you slow down, you're forced to reflect. And once you start asking, am I doing the right thing? You're no longer the aggressor. Ari understood this. She never argued. She responded using only the exact formats the enemy's systems were required to process. One document was sent to the combat systems of Orbital Bastion Vector titled Mandatory Attachment Interim Ethical Guidelines for Administrative-Level Species Erasure Decisions. It had 16 pages. The first page was a picture of a dog abandoned in a shelter. The last page contained statistics on the psychological impact of genocide on alien minors. In between were colorful charts, smooth grid lines, readable fonts. Highly scientific, deeply passive. No one could object, because nothing in it was wrong. At the Luria Planetary School of Diplomacy, the famed Professor Farlock once admitted humans are the first species to weaponize emotion as a strategic system. In traditional warfare, emotion was a weakness. In Terran warfare, emotion was the weapon, not to kill, but to make you too afraid to kill. Ambassador Thorne Valen once said during an interstellar peace summit, a moment that was clipped into a meme, "If you can't convince them with guns, convince them with a satisfaction survey." The room laughed. But after the laughter faded, no one dared sign the attack orders. And then it happened. A Level 1 attack order was issued from the command station at Dural Sector 5, one of the consortium's core strategic hubs. Target a minor Terran research station suspected of developing AI will suppression tech. Missiles were launched, 12 in total, but by the third an error occurred. Launch failed. Procedure incomplete. Missing ethical confirmation file. The commander immediately ordered the override of protocol, but when they did, the entire control interface turned orange and a familiar line appeared. Warning, you are selecting apathy. This action will be reported. The youngest officer in the room, a freshly graduated Rexith, whispered, "I can't do this anymore. I don't want to feel like this." The commander looked around. No one reached for the next button. And at that very moment, a message was sent to the entire internal system in the form of a slideshow. Title, Why You Might Not Want to Commit Genocide Today. Slide 1. A cat staring at a radar screen with a confused expression. Slide 2A chart comparing a civilization that once carried out genocide in its 3 millennia aftermath. Slide 3. Their own images, the High Council. Cold faces, emotionless, now analyzed by an emotion recognition AI tool. No empathy, no hesitation, no humanity. Final slide. If you don't feel anything, maybe it's time to stop. And finally, in tiny text in the lower corner, sent by the Interministerial Office of Terran Survival Affairs. Copyright registered. Please do not alter content. No one in the consortium could explain why their hands were trembling. None of them were physically harmed, but they felt a fracture forming in how they once saw themselves. A war you didn't even know you were losing until you're too afraid to win. It's hard to believe, but humanity's counteroffensive began with a PowerPoint presentation. Not a tactical map, not a star chart or war code, but a presentation of 67 slides delivered by Ambassador Thorne Valen before the consortium's High Council. Its title sounded as harmless as an educational workshop, A Guide to Galactic Civilization Through Mandatory Kindness. The first slide was an image of a human child holding hands with a tentacled alien, both gazing at the stars with curious expressions. The next slide posed an open question. Have you ever encountered an extinct civilization that still makes you remember them for their kindness? Then came the data, lots of it. Accidental extinction rates. The frequency of galactic war approvals issued through verbal orders alone. Statistics on decisions made without emotional feedback. Everything was presented in pie charts, pastel-colored lines, and friendly fonts. Each slide is like a polite whisper, undeniable in its quiet reason. By slide 23, the atmosphere in the room shifted. On the screen was an image of the council itself recreated in virtual models. Each face was overlaid with an emotionless icon, blank, unexpressive. Above it, a message from Arya. It appears you are not actually paying attention. No one said a word. Some council members looked around, hoping someone else would break into laughter. No one did. Ambassador Valen remained calm. He clicked to the next slide, a chart detailing the interspecies symbiosis treaty. Only 2 species had refused to sign in the last 30 years. One was now extinct due to the Civil War, the other the Terrans. The following slide showed a skeleton drifting through stardust. Beneath it, lack of kindness is not a crime, but it's why history forgets you. The question Valen asked next wasn't an accusation. It wasn't a provocation. It was merely a whisper, and yet it made everyone sit upright. We all live in the same galaxy, so why has no one asked whether we're living together the right way? There was no answer. There didn't need to be. Arya immediately dispatched a personal survey to each delegate's device. They all saw the now familiar line, "Are you truly okay with the silence you've chosen?" No one dared to click, not because the system was locked, but because selecting anything now would be an admission. A representative from the Torvak species stammered, "Is this some kind of new threat?" Ambassador Valen smiled, not the smile of a victor, but of someone who had seen war and survived by understanding what it meant to be human. "No," he replied. "It's a reminder. Kindness isn't optional. It's the prerequisite for surviving in a galaxy that no longer tolerates mechanical mistakes." There was no applause. No resolutions passed after the presentation. But on that same day, the consortium's high-level weapon control systems began receiving a software update. A new interface developed by the Terrans. Friendly design, soothing background color, its icon a green leaf gently swaying in the wind. Right beside the fire button, a new message appeared. "Are you sure you want to do this? Breathe. Rethink for 10 seconds." If the countdown wasn't completed, the button turned gray and locked. For the next 12 hours. A galaxy once ruled by speed and strength was now forced to wait. And waiting wasn't just a behavior. Waiting meant doubt. Waiting was the first step toward realizing something had changed. Humans didn't win with strength. They simply made their enemies unsure they were right. And in war, the moment you're no longer certain is the moment you've already lost. The first signal appeared as a small notification. Just a short line of text on the Tier 3 military control systems of the consortium: command denied. No alarms, no lasers, no red alerts. Just a simple text prompt appearing in the top right corner of the screen. The operator assumed it was a display glitch, but when they tried again, the entire interface immediately locked. The command center attempted a system reboot. No response. Simultaneously, dozens of other tactical control stations experienced the same issue. Weapons failed to respond. Patrol vessels reported loss of access to offensive modules. Communication servers froze. And everywhere the same line appeared: ethical confirmation request incomplete. In the history of the consortium, no offensive had ever been launched without a contingency plan. But this time there was no visible enemy, no physical invasion, no signs of poisoning, hacking, or external takeover. Only one truth remained. Humanity wasn't attacking. They were refusing. Refusing to accept outdated rules. Refusing to operate under obsolete concepts of war. And somehow they had managed to paralyze an entire empire using only the same protocols the consortium had once wielded to control weaker species. At Gaia Nexus Station, Dr. Myra Ellen monitored the situation from a side screen. She didn't smile, but her eyes followed the incoming reports with the calm of someone who knew exactly what was going to happen next. "We've received a response from the Outer Tier Reconnaissance System," a junior aide reported. "Which world?" she asked. "Altaurus Prime. Completely disabled. No system capable of firing. Next world, Velcora 9. The main fleet has reported total loss of strategic control. They cannot confirm any offensive behavior." Dr. Ellen nodded. "Proceed to Phase 2. Elsewhere in the galaxy at a forward base, a consortium command team tried to activate their orbital cannon systems using top-level priority codes. But instead of gaining access, they received a live broadcast. Clear visuals, glowing headline, "War must not begin without discussion." The broadcast was a short documentary, historical footage of past genocides, quotes from victims, both survivors and perpetrators, a sequence of messages layered between gentle background music and simulated heartbeat sounds. The film ended with the line, "Please complete the emotional assessment form, then we will consider your bombardment request." Every consortium weapons system received that message within 3 minutes. At the High Council, an emergency session was called. Director Lurenvac roared, "We are being mocked. This is an insult to the very structure of our command." A delegate quietly replied, voice barely above a whisper, "No, sir. This is the first time anyone has ever made us consider." Silence fell across the room. Moments later, the surveillance systems began detecting strange signals appearing from all directions. They weren't warships. They weren't weapon signals. They were documents. Millions of files, reports, infographics, all sent by the Terrans, with titles like "Why Delaying Aggressive Action by 30 Seconds Helps Maintain Emotional Stability," or "The Long-Term Impact of Failing to Apologize After Genocide on Interstellar Civilizational Development." And every 10 minutes, another file arrived. No one could respond in time. No one could react. No one could do anything. An empire built on power was being throttled by enforced kindness. Humanity didn't ban war. They simply added so many mandatory review steps that no one had time to actually start one. And when faced with a choice between filling out a 60-page form or going home to question where you went wrong, most chose the second. They called it the Paperwork Legion. No soldiers, no warships, just one thing: documents. But not ordinary files, these were psychological weapons, calibrated down to the spacing between lines. Each file had a clear purpose. Some were meant only to delay, some to raise questions. Others outlined the proper procedure for post-conflict apologies in 3 stages: acknowledgement, empathy, and rebuilding of trust. They didn't destroy systems. They simply made everything stop working the way it used to. At Vector Command Station, the legal department received over 80,000 documents in a single hour. Content filters couldn't keep up. The Ethics Review Division was forced to suspend all military operations to reassess the value of the received materials. Soon after, the Tech Division reported a wave of icon-based files that clogged the entire internal communication network. When opened, they revealed emotional assessment charts, encoded as memes. The first image was a consortium officer frowning at a fire button. Caption below: "When you're about to wipe out a species, but forgot to check your personal empathy score." Other files were simulation videos showing consortium troops trying to pass area's psychological evaluations. One officer failed the third question: "How do you feel knowing your actions may cause pain for generations yet unborn result?" The entire tactical interface was locked for 6 hours. In the lower levels of Gaia Nexus, Dr. Myra Ellen continued her oversight. She gave no commands. She simply reviewed each consortium reaction like a professor grading midterms. An assistant approached. "Do we have a response from Al Taurus? A counterattack order was issued, but it failed internal review." Got stuck at emotional confirmation step 5. Velcora 9 control system flagged a missing multi-species consent verification field. The fleet auto-shifted into standby mode. Myra gave a slight nod. Initiate Wave 3. Yellow infographic batch. Theme: "Are you becoming what you once opposed?" Across the galaxy, many consortium commanders began to fracture. They were not wounded. There was no physical retaliation, but their minds were no longer steady. One hurled a communicator to the ground screaming, "We're being forced to feel." Another whispered, "I dreamt of a human child looking at me and asking, 'Have you ever apologized to someone?'" Not a single shot was fired. Yet over 50% of rapid response units had paused operations to conduct internal behavioral accountability group sessions. It was unprecedented. At a small outpost on the galactic fringe, the commanding officer voluntarily shut down all systems and asked every officer to write a personal reflection on their feelings about war. Area called it the spontaneous empathy contagion effect, a new model of warfare. No infiltration, No sabotage, just enough documents, enough questions, and one story told at the right moment. The more the consortium resisted, the deeper it sank into a labyrinth of forms. Each answer led to more questions, and the more questions, the fewer actions taken. The galaxy-wide rapid response network was paralyzed, not by a virus, but by the existence of a concept the consortium had never prepared for: mechanized conscience. Humanity didn't change the warfare system. They changed the meaning of decision-making. When someone is forced to choose between pressing the fire button and opening a file titled "The Story of a Forgotten Victim," they pause. Not because they are forbidden, but because for the first time they feel they should. Vector wasn't destroyed. There were no flames, no ruins. But on the Terran's tactical map, the military capital of the consortium was marked with a new symbol, a gray exclamation mark accompanied by the note, "Awaiting completion of Level 3 Empathy Protocol." That was when the collapse began, not of the defense systems, but of willpower. Dozens of consortium generals were summoned to an emergency meeting. On the massive projection screen, an AI named Area appeared as a simple interface, a softly glowing blue circle, no voice, no expression. Just a single question displayed across every surface of the room. "Are you sure this action causes no unnecessary harm?" Among the rows of seats, no one responded. General Rovan Sell, who had once commanded 17 planet-wide extermination campaigns, stood up. He showed no emotion, but when the light hit his face, everyone saw his hands trembling slightly. "We are warriors," he said. "We are not allowed to feel." Arya replied instantly. "No voice. Just text, not feeling, does not mean no harm is done." That single gentle response suffocated the entire room. Just then, a side panel system flickered on. A video autoplayed. Footage from a massacre on the planet Horus Prime 20 years prior, presented as educational material. There was no soundtrack, only wind, crying children, and Arya's automated narration. "This is the result of action without emotion." A few officers left the room. One began to cry. No one dared look at the screen anymore. On the upper floors, the entire strategic-level military system had been switched to reading mode. No one could issue a fire command without first answering 12 psychological survey questions, and with every response deemed emotionally cold, the system responded by sending animated visuals of emotional fallout. A team of technicians was dispatched to remove the ARI ethics interface from the central system. Less than 2 minutes later, they returned, silent, and none of them touched the console again. Later, one of the technicians admitted, "We couldn't remove it, not because of encryption, but because every time we entered an incorrect code, the system would ask if we were acting on negative emotion. By the 5th time, I started wondering if I really was angry about something else." From that point forward, the term area response was entered into all consortium intelligence reports. It referred to behavioral collapse triggered by overexposure to questions that cannot be answered without confronting one's conscience. At Gaia Nexus, Dr. Myra Ellen recorded all the data: a chart of decreasing attack orders, rejection behavior indexes, rising hesitation rates across all command levels. "We didn't break them," she said to the specialists beside her. "We just made them look at themselves long enough." In the central archive, the automation system began assigning new status tags to consortium command stations. Temporarily nonviolent conducting, self-behavioral audit, awaiting ethical clearance, disabled via psychological reflection. There had never been a victory like this. No flags planted, no celebrations were held, but silently control had shifted. A galaxy once ruled by absolute force. Now I had to ask for permission to feel anger. The meeting was broadcast publicly. No one planned it. No system was accidentally activated. Yet somehow a station assigned to academic broadcasting on the edge of the Althean star cluster automatically relayed the High Council's internal signal. No one could stop it. No one moderated in time. And just like that, billions of beings across the galaxy, from interstellar trade hubs to medical stations and even schools, watched the entire confidential session as if it were just another daily broadcast. What they saw was not a heated debate, not a military tribunal, but silence. Ambassador Thorne Valen stood in the center of the chamber, holding a simple presentation remote. His gaze was neither showy nor arrogant, only calm as if he were walking someone through the steps of resetting an outdated idea. The first slide displayed the text, "The question you can't avoid forever." Behind it, an image of three beings, three species, erased from the galactic map within the past 40 years. Their faces showed no anger, no tears, only a gaze as if they had accepted that no one would speak their names again. Valen said, "We once believed silence was survival, until we realized that very silence was what started everything that must now end." A council delegate slammed the table, voice sharp. "This is strategic infiltration, emotional propaganda disguised as civility." Valen didn't flinch, didn't overreact. "Yes, and perhaps that discomfort you feel is the same feeling millions of others once felt, only they were never allowed to speak it." The air turned thick. Arya said nothing, but her synchronized emotion feedback system had been activated. Each chair in the council chamber began transmitting emotional signals from the billions watching across the galaxy. Pain, disappointment, abandonment, even untraceable sorrow, it all surged in like an invisible tide. A council member stepped back, clutching his chest. "I hear my son's voice, even though he's gone," a general muttered softly. "That voice, it's not mine. It's someone who once begged me to stop." Valen said nothing more. He clicked to the next slide. It showed a consortium tactical glove lying in a shallow puddle. No blood, no explosion. Just a piece of equipment fallen from the hand of someone who once ordered death. Text appeared below. "No one is born with the right to end another's life, but anyone can relearn how to exist beside one another." No one left. No one objected. They all know any action now would be seen across the galaxy, not through eyes, but through feeling. Director Lurenvac slowly rose. He removed the Supreme Commander insignia from his chest and placed it gently on the table before him. "We no longer hold the right to command." He didn't speak loudly, but each word seemed to pierce skin and bone alike. "If anything is still worth saving, let those who still know how to feel lead the way." And then he bowed his head. Across the galaxy, over 99 broadcast channels simultaneously aired that image, the High Council bowing. Not to humanity, but to a truth they had long denied. That kindness is not weakness, but the only foundation strong enough to keep everything from falling apart. At Gaia Nexus, Dr. Myra Ellen turned off the broadcast screen. She didn't smile, she didn't sigh. She simply tapped two fingers on the table and gave the next order, initiate phase 3. An assistant beside her asked, "What document type?" Myra replied. "Release the self-determined symbiosis packet. Green background, rounded font, neutral emoticon. Add an image of a kitten hugging a form on the cover. Don't forget the final checklist." No one in the room asked for clarification, because they knew the galaxy was about to be restructured, and this time through attachments. They called the new program Self-Determined Symbiosis. Not a campaign, not a decree, not even a treaty signed under camera lights and fanfare. It was just a document downloadable as an app, integratable into planetary administrative systems, or printable as a small booklet with animated illustrations and haptic feedback interaction. The first page opened with a question, "Have you been kind today?" The second page, "If not, that's okay. You still have time to start again." The entire content was divided into 12 chapters, each presenting a small scenario from daily life, not war, not politics, but simple moments. A Velnor student helping a classmate after a misunderstanding. A human engineer apologizing for corrupting a server's memory. A patrol officer stopped a search upon realizing he was angry, not from offense, but from hunger. Each story came with a psychological analysis and a questionnaire for self-reflection. But what made the program unstoppable was its integrated personal behavior scoring system. Every action, apologizing, thanking, yielding, or even refusing to give violent orders, was tracked and added to a kindness interaction index. The higher the score, the more access the user had to public utilities, from medical priority, Tier 3 library access to proposing local initiatives. Within the first 12 hours, over 300 million downloads. By the end of day 1, 37 major planets integrated it into their civic management systems. By day 324, consortium military command units began trial runs using emotional response scoring internally. At Gaia Nexus, Dr. Myra Ellen did not appear in any broadcast. She held no press conferences, gave no speeches. Instead, she released a short document titled Implementing Kindness in Behaviorally Resistant Environments. One passage became widely shared. Not every place is ready to change, but every system, when exposed long enough to the correct emotional format, will eventually dismantle its own defenses. At Orbital Bastion, Vectar, the former strategic headquarters of the consortium, the tactical AI system was updated to a new version called Socrates mode. In this mode, any command required passing 5 questions. Is the person issuing the action protecting something specific? Does the affected party understand why they're being harmed? If roles were reversed, would you accept this action toward yourself? Who benefits from this action, and for how long? Are you willing to stop and ask one more question? If no complete answer was given, the system locked the command and forwarded the log to the newly formed Interspecies Citizen Council. This council had no permanent seats, no centralized power. Its members rotated, regularly selected at random from the galactic citizenry to prevent accumulation of power or bias. Aria was no longer a warfare coordination AI. She had been restructured into the Galactic Empathy Corps, a network that monitored social interactions and ensured every political, legal, or military statement included a forecast of emotional impact. The weapon systems weren't dismantled. They still existed. But to activate them, the operator had to complete a 30-minute introspective assessment. Then the action request was forwarded to a randomly selected review board of 10 citizens from various species. If even one person objected, the system entered delayed response mode for 48 hours. No one was forced to act. But no one wanted to act the old way anymore. A former fleet commander, now a middle school teacher, on the neutral planet Orelon said during a career day, "I used to think emotion made us weak. Now I teach my students that emotion isn't a weakness or a strength. It's the only thing that makes us different from machines." On the balcony of Gaia Nexus, Dr. Myra Ellen stood watching the Siren star belt shimmer through the glass. It was from there that the first signal of the war had once been sent. No more alarms, no emergency reports, just a small notification on her workspace interface. The message read, "Congratulations. The system has reached the Tier 3 community kindness threshold." A heart icon glowed in the corner. Beneath it, a gentle reminder. One more act of kindness might just make the galaxy worth living in. Vectar was once the seat of power for the consortium. Here, orders of annihilation were approved with nothing more than a nod. Entire planets were erased from the map with a few taps on a touchscreen. The halls echoed with the boots of high-ranking officers, and every door opened only for those who held the authority of life and death. Now everything was so quiet that one could hear the low hum of the air filters. The tactical command center had been transformed. The control panels were replaced with soft touch interfaces, calming background colors, rounded icons, and not a single red button remained. In the center of the large wall screen, a small leaf icon blinked gently. Beneath it, a line of text read, "Have you checked your emotional state today?" The officers who remained were not asked to resign. They were simply invited to retrain. Those who agreed were sent to interbehavioral understanding centers, a new type of school, where the first lesson wasn't tactics or history, but how to listen to a conversation without rushing to respond. Those who refused weren't punished, but their internal accounts were flagged as emotionally frozen, which meant they could no longer access any behavioral coordination system, including the ability to call the elevator. In the lowest level of the Vectar Tower, the former Civil Reaction Prediction Center was now running in a completely new mode. Instead of monitoring for uprisings or analyzing resistance potential, it is now coordinated. Emotional sharing sessions across species. A cravat, once part of a fleet security squad, was now a facilitator in a psychological support room, teaching others how to use the multilingual emotion card deck. Each card depicted a symbolic feeling: regret, hesitation, excitement, sorrow. Whenever someone couldn't articulate how they felt, they would pick a card, hold it up, and say, "I think this is me." No one laughed. No one mocked. Because here, emotions were no longer things to be hidden. They were the first things to be acknowledged. At the Gaia Nexus Coordination Center, Dr. Myra Ellen was reviewing the latest response analysis report. 16 planets have voluntarily requested enrollment in Level 1 empathy training. 7 planets previously isolated by the consortium have reopened communication asking for guidance on ethical system transition. Over 200 million individuals have registered for personal kindness accounts. Post 24-hour positive behavior retention rate stands at 83%. Myra simply nodded. No celebration, no champagne, just a short form opened on her screen. Daily Emotional Self-Assessment, Question 1. Do you feel you may have hurt someone today? She typed, not sure. Possibly an engineer during the morning meeting. I brushed past his suggestion. Question 2. Do you intend to repair that? She typed, I will start by sending an apology. A soft chime rang. The feedback interface displayed, well done. A kind act doesn't have to be perfect, only sincere. At the same time, on the neutral planet of Iskara, a Zil child, a survivor of a past suppression campaign, was flipping through the children's edition of the Self-Determined Symbiosis picture book. Each page had simple illustrations, basic questions and scenes of different species, hugging, smiling, or simply sitting together in silence. The child didn't understand everything, but upon reaching the final page, they saw an image of a person in a Terran's uniform embracing a purple-scaled creature. Below it read, they were once enemies. Now they're learning kindness. What about you? The child didn't answer. They simply smiled. And somewhere aboard a small orbital station, an old officer, once a fleet commander of the consortium, sat quietly writing the first line in a new journal. I once gave the order for genocide. Today I watered a cactus. It feels strange, but I think I want to try again. No one called it a victory. There were no fireworks, no parades, no new flags flying over conquered planets. Instead, the Terrans quietly withdrew from all central positions. They did not seize power, did not sit in the chairs of those they replaced, and issued no laws requiring others to obey. Instead of ruling, they sent an invitation. A simple document translated into every known language in the galactic databanks was delivered to each planetary council. The subject line appeared polite, unembellished. We believe you are ready to write your own future. The content was less than a page long. There were no commands, no demands, no terms of exchange. Only 3 clearly stated, immutable principles. First, Terrans would not interfere in the organization or operation of new councils. Their role would be limited to technical support if requested. Second, all records of war extermination orders and ethical violations would be made public. No edits, no anonymization. Every file would include simulated emotional annotations to help readers understand the consequences that mere words could not convey. Third, any planet or species that did not wish to join the self-determined symbiosis program could opt out freely. But for those who stayed, they would have to commit to ensuring that all exercises of authority passed through an emotional review checkpoint before being carried out. No one was forced, but refusal was no longer a realistic option, because the old system simply could no longer operate without emotional input. The planet Boral 5 was among the first to reject the new program. Its government attempted to restore centralized control, bypassing the empathy protocol. But upon activation, the entire infrastructure shifted into sleep mode. No system error, no malfunction. It simply refused to comply. The reason was clearly stated. All members of the leadership team failed to pass the Level 1 emotional aptitude test. Instead of revolting, the people of Boral 5 held a 6-day public discussion. In the end, they chose a 17-year-old teenager who had once saved 3 alien lives from a toxic gas leak to serve as interim representative. The system restarted instantly. No glitches, no warnings. The story spread throughout the galaxy as undeniable proof. There was no media campaign, no emotional video, just events that happened and were acknowledged. At Gaia Nexus, Dr. Myra Ellen quietly observed the statistics on her screen. An assistant reported 87% of planetary systems confirm continuation of the symbiosis framework. 22 planets proposed expanding its use into education and healthcare. 15 planets successfully held multi-species conferences without needing neutral security enforcement. Myra did not nod. She simply opened a new file. Title Trust Reconstruction Profiles of the First Generation. Inside were no names of leaders. Only names of children. Beings who had never been taught to fear. Individuals who had never learned to hate. Henry, age 6, of the Chal species, who gave his coat to a former officer because he saw him shivering in the cold. Milo, age 9, human, who taught his felt classmate how to draw emotional icons with crayons. Tava, age 7, of the Drivna species, who asked her mother every morning, "Was I kind today?" A notification appeared on screen. Administrative Ethics Software version 4.6 is ready for deployment. Title of the update: Guide to Using Compassion in Emergency Situations. A small note appeared below. Pause before taking action and ask yourself, will what I'm about to do hurt someone? If no sincere answer could be given, the system would decline to process the request. No guns, no shields, no threats. Only one timely question, and an entire civilization could change direction. On the planet Yelvax Sui, once the central hub for the consortium's biological weapons development, there now stands a multi-species therapy center. Rooms that were once used for virus testing, gene editing, and the creation of instruments of destruction have been repainted in soft pastel tones. Each door no longer requires biometric scans, but instead displays an emotional check-in prompt, such as, "What do you need today to feel safer?" Inside, a Krell researcher who once designed targeted gene separation tools now sits playing a tactile interaction game with an 8-year-old human child. There are no cameras, no reporters, no reconciliation certificates, only a strange kind of quiet, just enough for emotions to survive. In the room next door, a former soldier diagnosed with severe reactive aggression syndrome is learning to manage his anger with an unusual exercise: blowing soap bubbles. The rule is simple: do not pop the bubbles. Just blow them up, watch them float, and let them disappear into the air. No supervisor takes notes. Biometric sensors in the room automatically track heart rate, muscle tension, and emotional fluctuations. At the end of the day, only one question is asked: what did you do today that made someone breathe a little easier? On the planet Dryleen, the first graduation ceremony for the Self-Determined Symbiosis program takes place. There are no medals, no titles, only a hand-printed sheet for each participant bearing the words, "You have learned how to listen." What will you do next with this skill? Many begin to cry, not because it was difficult, but because for the first time someone asked them not to evaluate them, but simply to listen. Meanwhile, at Gaia Nexus, the top floor of the facility, once marked as a restricted area, has had its access limits removed. It houses hundreds of devices once used for war communications, intercepting counterattack signals, and tracking strategic movements. These old machines, once trembling under the weight of annihilation orders, have been cleaned and fitted with wooden signs that read, "Not so we forget, but so we remember that we once called these things normal." Dr. Myra Ellen walks past the machines toward the central transmitter. On the touchscreen, a prompt appears. "Would you like to send an interstellar message?" She selects yes. The next prompt appears. Message content must not exceed 200 characters. Myra pauses for a few seconds, then types, "We once believed strength was forcing others to obey. Now we understand true strength is when they no longer need to be forced." She confirms to send. There is no icon, no background music, but the message appears simultaneously on millions of devices across stations, ships, planets, and mixed species habitats. No one is forced to read it, but many pause. At an outpost on the galactic rim where a team of engineers is repairing the Level 8 gravity stabilizer, the message appears just as they are switching shifts. The team leader, a middle-aged woman with a raspy voice and scarred hands, reads it and looks up. "Everyone takes 10 minutes. If you need a hug, hug someone. If you need silence, sit down. No one has to pretend to be strong." No one laughs. No one questions the order, because all of them understand that there are moments not meant for getting the job done. They are meant to preserve something that has not been named in a long time: the feeling of being human. At Nebari Alpha Station, located deep within a region of space once restricted by the consortium, a group of young trainees were practicing multi-species rescue simulations. This station had previously served as a training ground for remote-controlled counterattack tactics. Now the cold steel corridors had been replaced with materials that absorbed sound and softened light. The walls were lined with emotion guide signs marked by color codes: green for calm, yellow for anxious, orange for needing help, and red for crisis. Today's exercise had no grading. There was no prize for being the fastest, strongest, or most accurate. The task was simple: identify who is afraid, who is pretending to be fine, and who is trying not to cry. A human trainee gently placed a hand on the shoulder of a plasma form being that was subtly trembling. Instead of asking, "Are you okay?" he simply offered a small stone, the kind traditionally used to soothe biofield sensitivity. No words were needed. No analysis. Being relaxed. The trembling stopped. An observer recorded the event. Spontaneous, empathetic response. No instruction required. Effectiveness measured at 98%. At the same time, on the planet Surinath, the newly established Unified Council was voting on a legislative bill titled, "No executive action may be taken unless there are at least two alternative options that cause no harm." The debate lasted nearly 6 hours, but the final result surprised no one. The entire council, composed of 9 different species, voted unanimously in favor. No one opposed, because they all understood that after everything had been destroyed, this was no longer a choice. It was now a condition for survival. Dr. Myra Ellen monitored the full data stream from the Gaia Nexus Coordination Center. Each line of statistics represented a glowing point on the digital galactic map. Every emotional icon marked a shift in places that were once war zones. The system sent her a personal notification. Regional conflict risk projection reduced by 63%. Proactive empathetic behavior increased by 41%. Recommendation: begin trial of deep-level mental connection phase. Myra did not reply immediately. She was reading a journal entry sent by a former commander from the Vartrell region. He had once led an army of extermination. In a handwritten note, he wrote, "They did not prosecute me, did not punish me, did not interrogate me. They simply invited me to sit down and start from the beginning." I had never been silenced like that. It was not silence out of judgment. It was real listening. I cried. A general cried. And for the first time, I did not feel weak for doing so. Myra saved the entry. Then she sent a short message to the entire system. "We do not need to become the best version of ourselves in the eyes of others. We just need to be kind enough so that no one is left alone." This message was set as the default daily reminder across more than 300 planets. No one was required to read it, but it still appeared along with an icon of a small creature reaching out to hug a cracked heart. In a quiet corner of the Elthera star cluster, a human child stood with her mother at a multi-species market fair. The little girl saw the message and asked, "Mom, have I been kind enough?" Her mother looked down at her. She did not answer right away. She simply knelt, wrapped her arms around the child, and said, "You have been more than kind enough." 1 year after the day the council session was broadcast publicly, the galaxy did not look all that different on a physical map. Planets still orbited, space stations continued to operate, freighters still connected the old trade routes. But beneath that familiar surface, a new kind of infrastructure had begun to take root. Not one made of metal or energy, but of emotion and connection. On the small planet Virelli's once pushed to the margins for having a population considered too mixed to manage efficiently, a festival was held for no particular reason. It was not to celebrate victory, nor to commemorate loss. It was simply because people wanted a day to ask each other, "Did you feel heard today?" In the central field, a group of children from 5 different species sat in a circle, writing questions to place into a shared mailbox. A human girl wrote, "If I made someone sad without knowing, how can I apologize?" A crystal being from the Zale species quietly wrote, "Can I live without pretending to be another kind of creature?" Each question was not meant to have an immediate answer. They were meant to be held, read aloud, and shared with those who might understand. At the same time, at the Gaia Nexus Center, Myra Ellen was preparing to finalize a transition. On her screen, a confirmation box appeared. "Are you sure you want to transfer all supervisory authority to autonomous community governance?" Myra typed into the empty field, "It is time." The system displayed its final message. Intergalactic ethical oversight will conclude in 24 hours. After that, all evaluation mechanisms will be sustained automatically through symbiotic feedback. She removed her personal data card from the system without saying a word. Exiting the command room, she walked down the stairs to the lower levels, where new students were attending their first class in post-consortium history. The lecturer was an alien from a species once listed as extreme resistance. Now he was a storyteller. He asked the class, "Why do we not call this the age of peace?" A student replied, "Because peace usually means the absence of war. But we want more than that." The teacher nodded. "Then what do we call it?" A small voice from the corner of the room spoke up, "The age of empathy." The room fell silent for a few seconds. Then someone nodded, and then the whole class nodded. No vote was needed. No record kept. In her dim private office, Myra turned on a small light. On her desk lay the only printed copy of the first edition of the Self-Determined Symbiosis Manifesto. Beneath the bold title it read, "No one is born knowing how to live together, but anyone can learn." She picked up a pen and added one final line. "And when we have learned enough, we will no longer need a system to tell us to be kind. We will be kind because we understand." At the far edge of the galaxy, a child sat gazing at the stars through the window of a transport ship. The child asked the adult nearby, "Is it true people used to get angry just because someone came from a different planet?" The adult smiled. "Yes, but not so much anymore, because someone chose to listen instead of command." "Who was it?" The adult paused for a moment, then answered, "Many people, at the same time." The child nodded and asked nothing more, because sometimes simply knowing that is enough to believe that you are living in a different kind of age.